My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 34 years old, a veterinarian living in Portland, Oregon. I've always believed that life at its core is about building trust. Trust with your family, trust with your partner, trust with yourself. And for the longest time, I thought I had built my world on a foundation that was rock solid. I had the career I dreamed of as a child, working with animals and running a small but thriving clinic in the northeast part of town. I had a beautiful little home with climbing roses out front and a rescued border collie named Jasper who followed me everywhere. I had people who loved me, or so I believed. And most of all, I had Liam Carter. We met 5 years ago at a holiday charity event for animal rescue. He was kind, charming, smart, a landscape architect who had a quiet soul and the kind of patience that made you feel safe. He brought coffee to my clinic on long days. He remembered the name of every animal I treated. He once drove 3 hours just to surprise me with my favorite lemon meringue pie from a tiny bakery on the coast. When he proposed, I said yes before he finished the question. My mother, Vivian Brooks, adored him. She was the first person I called after we got engaged, and she cried happy tears the entire phone call. She had been a widow since I was 17, and our bond was more than mother and daughter. We were best friends. She was the strong, graceful woman I had always looked up to. Retired now, but once a beloved high school literature teacher, known for her calm wisdom and quiet strength, Vivian and Liam had a natural connection. They shared a love of gardening and old jazz records. She often called him the son she never had. The three of us would have dinner together most weekends. We laughed, we made plans. We felt like a family. So when I say that I believed I was the luckiest woman alive, I meant it. I was about to marry the man I loved with my mother by my side, and our ceremony planned for a Saturday afternoon, in a beautiful historic chapel on the Oregon coast. I had no reason to expect that the night before my wedding, the two people I trusted most in the world would shatter everything. But that's exactly what they did. And the way I responded, what I did at the altar in front of 150 guests, was something no one saw coming, not even them. Liam and I met on a rainy December afternoon 5 years ago. I was volunteering at a local animal shelter's adoption fair, bundled up in a red parka and knee-deep in paperwork and puppy accidents, when he walked in holding a crate with a limping golden retriever. The dog had been hit by a car, and he had found her on the side of the road during his drive back from a landscaping project in Cannon Beach. He looked a little panicked, but gentle, like someone who wanted to help and just didn't know how. I took the crate from him and promised we'd do everything we could. He stayed at the shelter the entire night. He held that dog's paw as we cleaned her wounds, and by morning I had learned he wasn't just kind. He was deeply compassionate. That was the beginning. We started dating slowly. He was thoughtful, always giving space without drifting away. He sent me books he thought I'd love and left notes under my windshield wipers just to say have a good day. Liam was the first man I ever dated who made me feel like I didn't have to prove my worth. He simply saw it. After a year, he moved into my house in the Alberta Arts District. We made a home together, warm, quiet, simple. He built me a garden out back full of lavender and rosemary and wildflowers. I remember coming home after a long shift and finding solar lights shaped like little foxes lining the walkway. It was the kind of thoughtfulness that felt old-fashioned rare. We weren't flashy, no big parties or constant Instagram photos. Just dinners on the couch, weekend hikes, and early Sunday mornings listening to records. And that was exactly what I wanted. When he proposed during a trip to Victoria on a foggy morning while we stood on the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea, I didn't hesitate for a second. I said yes with my whole heart. My mother, Vivian, was overjoyed. She always worried I worked too hard, loved too carefully. Seeing me settle down seemed to ease something in her. She and Liam hit it off almost immediately. He helped her in the yard when she needed it, brought her her favorite tea leaves from a little shop downtown, and even taught her how to use streaming apps when she retired and found herself out of the loop. It made me happy seeing them close. She was alone most days after retirement, and Liam filled a space my father had left behind. Not as a replacement, but as a presence. Vivian called him her favorite unofficial son. She even joked once, "If you two ever break up, I'm keeping him." I laughed. Now that joke haunts me. As the wedding approached, my days were a blur of planning. Vivian insisted on helping with the flowers, saying she wanted them to feel alive and wild, not stiff and museum-like. She came with me to dress fittings, helped me choose a silk gown with lace sleeves, and cried the first time I tried it on. She was there for every step, picking the music, the caterer, the chapel. It meant everything to have her so involved. We chose to marry at a small historic stone chapel on the cliffs of Oceanside, Oregon. I had driven past it as a teenager and whispered to myself that I'd get married there someday. It held only 150 guests, which was perfect, intimate, reverent, the kind of place where every detail mattered. We invited close family, old friends, colleagues from the clinic, and a few of Liam's clients and college friends. The guest list was small but meaningful. Liam's best man was his childhood friend Josh, a funny, loud guy with a good heart. My maid of honor was my best friend from veterinary school, Harper. She'd flown in from Atlanta and brought the calm, grounded energy I desperately needed in those final days of preparation. I wrote personal vows. I wrote a letter to Liam that I planned to read quietly to him just before we walked down the aisle. A letter about how he had brought peace into my life in a way no one else ever had. I wrote another letter to my mother, one I planned to give her, with a gift, a small gold locket, engraved with, "You were my first home." She never received it. Instead, she would receive something else, something she never saw coming. The morning before the wedding, we had a small brunch with our bridal party at a lakeside cabin near the chapel. Everyone was laughing, passing around old stories and mimosas. Vivian sat beside Liam, their heads close as they looked at something on her phone. I assumed it was wedding details. When she caught me watching, she smiled and said, "He's helping me with a surprise for you." And I believed her, because why wouldn't I? That was the problem. I had no reason to doubt them. They gave me no signs, no whispers, no suspicious glances, no strange absences. Or maybe they did, and I just refused to see them. Sometimes you don't look too closely at the people you love. You don't want to believe they're capable of the things that destroy you. Especially not your own mother. Especially not the man you're about to marry. And yet, less than 24 hours after that brunch, I would stand in front of them both with a microphone in my hand and destroy every illusion they had built. Not out of rage, but out of clarity. Out of the unwavering belief that the truth deserves a place at the altar too. The night before the wedding, I stayed with my maid of honor, Harper, at a small inn near the chapel. It was tradition bride and groom spending the night apart. And honestly, I welcomed the quiet. I needed the space to breathe. Liam and my mother were back at the main house we had rented for the weekend, a beautiful cedar frame lodge overlooking the water. The idea was for them to handle some last-minute logistics, flowers, rehearsal details, place cards. Vivian had insisted on staying there because it was closer to the venue and less chaotic than the inn. I didn't think twice. That evening, Harper and I ordered takeout, painted our nails, and watched old romantic comedies on her laptop. Around 11, she fell asleep. I stayed up a bit longer, scrolling through some photos on my phone, reading over the vows I had written. I was nervous, excited, ready. Or at least I thought I was. At about midnight, I realized I had forgotten to send the final guest list to the photographer. It was saved on my laptop, which I'd left back at the lodge. I didn't want to bother Liam or my mom, so I called Josh, Liam's best man, who I knew was still awake. He offered to swing by the lodge and grab the laptop for me. I gave him the door code and thanked him. 20 minutes later, Josh texted, "Got it. But you might want to check the folder on your desktop labeled Florals Mom." Something weird. I didn't understand. I opened my laptop, sat cross-legged on the bed, and clicked the folder. Inside were several subfolders. Most contained flower arrangement photos, invoices, Pinterest screenshots. But one folder, oddly named Archive, Do Not Delete, caught my eye. I opened it. What I saw made my chest tighten so hard I thought I was having a panic attack. There were photos, some blurry, some crystal clear. Selfies of Liam and my mother. Not friendly photos. Intimate ones. Him shirtless in my childhood kitchen. Her in a silk robe I had given her for Mother's Day. A mirror selfie of them together in a hotel bathroom. At first, I couldn't process it. My mind refused to compute what I was seeing. I felt like I was watching someone else's nightmare. Then came the texts, a synced iMessage thread between their devices, dozens of messages. From Liam, I can't stop thinking about last night. You smelled like summer. I still taste you. From Vivian, you make me feel alive again. Like a woman, not just a mother. Do you ever regret saying yes to her? There were timestamps, dates, photos that had clearly been taken in my home and my clinic's parking lot in her car. This wasn't a drunken one-time mistake. This had been happening for months. My hands started to shake, my vision blurred. I remember hearing a ringing in my ears that wouldn't go away. I closed the laptop. I reopened it. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I misunderstood. I didn't. I clicked through everything again, each message a knife, each image another blow. I wasn't just being betrayed, I was being erased. Like I was the third wheel in my own relationship. And it wasn't just Liam. It was her, my mother, the woman who raised me, the one I trusted with everything, the one who held my hand when my father died, the one who had once told me after a high school heartbreak that no man is worth breaking your soul over. I didn't cry. Not then. My body went cold. My thoughts narrowed. I remember thinking, this cannot be real. But it was. I sat still for a long time. Harper was still asleep. The world was still quiet. Outside, I could hear the sound of waves rolling onto the rocks. Everything looked the same. But inside, everything had changed. I could have called them. I could have stormed over to the lodge, screamed, thrown things, demanded answers. I didn't. Instead, I got up, took a long shower, and made tea. The kind my mother used to brew when I was sick, chamomile with honey. I stood by the window and watched the sky begin to pale. And somewhere between 4 and 5 a.m., a decision formed. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. I was going to let the day go on as planned. I would put on my dress. I would walk down that aisle. I would stand in front of everyone who ever mattered to me, our friends, our families, our entire history. And I would let them believe everything was still perfect. Right up until the moment it wasn't. That would be my justice. I'm not a vengeful person. I don't like scenes. I don't enjoy pain. But this was something else. This was a betrayal so deep, so personal, it couldn't be handled in whispers behind closed doors. If they were bold enough to do this to me, to hide it, to lie to my face, to make wedding plans and speeches and toast glasses to a future they never intended to build with me, then they deserve to face the truth. Not just from me, from everyone. That morning, I called my friend Natalie, a wedding videographer, who'd already agreed to document the ceremony. I asked her to bring a second setup. Discreet, nothing dramatic. Just a live stream link, just in case I said, for the out-of-town relatives. Then I called Ben, an old friend of mine from high school, now a digital media editor. I told him I had a video I needed help editing. He didn't ask questions. While everyone else slept, I began my own kind of wedding prep. By 9 a.m., the final version of the video was ready. By 10, I had created a clean, elegant card that read, "To our beloved guests, before we say, I do, we'd like to share something personal with you. Scan the code," and by noon, those cards were being tucked into the programs for every guest at the ceremony. Nobody knew. Not Liam, not my mother. They smiled for the photographer, laughed with the guests. My mother kissed my cheek and said, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." And I smiled back and said, "I know, Mom," because now I did. I finally knew everything. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 p.m. at the Chapel of the Sea, a small stone church perched on the edge of a bluff in Oceanside. It was the kind of place that made people speak in whispers and walk a little slower. There was a reverence to it, a stillness that seemed to make time pause. The morning passed in a blur. Makeup, hair, final touches. Harper stayed by my side the entire time, sensing something in my silence, but choosing not to press. She was the kind of friend who understood that sometimes the best support was presence, not questions. I wore the dress my mother had helped me choose. Ivory silk lace sleeves, a modest train. I let her zip it up with her trembling hands. I looked her straight in the eye as she said, "You look beautiful," just like I always imagined. I didn't flinch. I said, "Thank you." Liam arrived with his groomsmen around noon. He looked handsome, gray suit, navy tie, the cufflinks I'd given him 2 Christmases ago. He kissed my hand before the ceremony and whispered, "I can't wait to be your husband." And I smiled. I smiled like someone who hadn't spent the night staring at betrayal. No one suspected a thing. The chapel filled slowly. Guests took their seats admiring the floral arrangements and the ocean view. My Aunt Joan, who had flown in from Virginia, was already tearing up and dabbing her eyes with a tissue. My old college professor was there, sitting next to one of my former clients, who had driven 4 hours with her husband and 3 kids. The pews were filled with people who loved me, people who believed this day was about joy. They were half right. Each guest received a program wrapped in a soft blue ribbon. Inside the cover was the card white with gold lettering understated. The QR code sat in the center like an invitation to something meaningful. The message read, "Before our vows, we want to share a piece of our journey. Scan this to witness what brought us here today." It sounded harmless, sentimental. In a world filled with wedding hashtags and photo montages, no one questioned it. They simply took out their phones and scanned. I had timed it precisely. The cards were handed out 10 minutes before the ceremony began. Just enough time for the video to circulate, but not long enough for chaos to fully erupt. The video began with music soft piano, a title screen, Elena and Liam, the unseen moments. Then came the images. Photos of Liam and my mother Vivian in places and positions that left no room for confusion. Screenshots of their messages. Audio clips layered with their voices, flirty, intimate, too familiar. At first, guests thought it was a mistake. Some whispered. Others frowned. Then came the shock. Audible gasps. Murmurs. Hands covering mouths. I saw someone drop their phone. My cousin Mark looked at me from across the aisle, his face twisted in disbelief. My Aunt Joan shook her head slowly, then looked over at my mother, who was still chatting with the organist, unaware. The energy in the room shifted like a storm front moving in. And yet, the ceremony began. The music started. I stood at the end of the aisle with Harper holding my train. The doors opened. I walked slowly, deliberately, every step measured. I passed faces I'd known since childhood, neighbors, teachers, friends. Some stared at me stunned. Others looked away, unsure of what to do. I saw people leaning toward each other, whispering urgently, showing screens shaking their heads. But I didn't break stride. When I reached the altar, Liam took my hand. His smile was steady, his eyes warm. My mother stood in the front row, beaming, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. Father Thomas welcomed everyone. He spoke of love, of union, of promises made before God and community. And then he reached the moment. If anyone here knows of any reason this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The room was silent, not because there was no reason, but because everyone was still processing what they'd just seen. I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, taking the microphone from Father Thomas, "I have something to say." The room froze. Liam turned to me confused. My mother's smile faltered. I looked out at the guests, then down at the altar. "First, I want to thank everyone for being here today," I said calmly. "Your presence means more to me than I can say. I know most of you came expecting to witness a celebration of love, and in a way you still will." I turned to Liam. "You once told me you'd never hurt me, that you respected me, that you loved me in ways no one else ever had." Then I looked to my mother. "And you, Mom, you raised me. You held my hand through every hard moment of my life. You taught me how to love with strength. You told me to never let a man make me feel small." I paused. "But both of you did exactly that." The silence was suffocating. You could hear every breath, every heartbeat. Last night I discovered the truth, that the man I was going to marry and the woman who gave birth to me have been having an affair. Not a mistake, not a one-time lapse in judgment. A relationship, a secret, something they planned to keep hidden as I walked down this aisle. There were audible gasps now. Someone stood up in the back. Liam's face turned ghostly pale. My mother stood, her mouth parted, a trembling hand at her chest. "The video you all saw, that wasn't a joke. It wasn't edited. It was real." Liam stepped forward, stammering. "Elena, please." I raised a hand. "No, you don't get to speak here. You had months to speak. You had last night. Instead, you chose silence. You chose secrecy. You chose each other." My mother opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. just tears, just shaking. I looked back at the guests. To every person here, thank you for witnessing the truth with me. Not the fantasy, not the fairy tale, but the truth. It may not be what I wanted to share with you today, but maybe it's what needed to be seen. I took off my engagement ring and set it on the altar. I won't be marrying Liam today. And then I turned, walked down the aisle, and out into the sunlight. I didn't run. I didn't hide my face. I walked with my head held high, the ocean wind lifting my veil like a flag. Behind me, the chapel erupted, people shouting, some crying, others following me in stunned silence. I heard someone call my name. I didn't stop. I reached the edge of the bluff, stared out at the sea, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The truth had been spoken, and I was free. The days that followed were strange. After I left the chapel, I didn't go back to the lodge. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't speak to anyone except Harper, who followed me into the parking lot and drove us straight to a bed and breakfast 2 towns over. We checked in under her name. I needed space, and more than that, I needed to disappear. For the first 24 hours, I stayed in bed. I didn't cry, not really. I just stared at the ceiling. There was a kind of numbness that settled over me, like I'd stepped out of my own body and was watching everything from the outside. But the world didn't stop. By the next morning, the story had already started spreading. Someone at the ceremony had recorded my speech. Another person had reposted the QR video online. Within hours, both had gone viral. It started on Reddit, a thread titled "Bride Exposes Cheating Fiancé and Mom at the Altar." From there, it spread to TikTok and Instagram. My name wasn't in the original post, but people figured it out fast. Someone tagged the chapel, another tagged Liam's design firm. It didn't take long for the local news to pick it up, and once they did, it snowballed. At first, I tried to ignore it. Harper handled my phone, filtered my messages, deleted anything she thought would hurt. But eventually, I started seeing it for myself. Thousands of comments, women cheering, strangers offering support, people calling me brave, some calling me cruel. Everyone had an opinion. But the truth was, I hadn't done it for any of them. I did it because the idea of standing in front of those two people pretending nothing had happened, pretending that I didn't know, that was a lie I refused to carry. Back in Portland, things unraveled quickly. Liam lost his job at the design firm. One of his biggest clients had been at the wedding. She pulled out of a multi-million-dollar project the next morning. His partners asked him to resign quietly. The firm posted a statement about professional standards and personal accountability. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel joy. I just felt tired. My mother retreated into silence. She didn't reach out to me, not once. I heard from a family friend that she had left town and was staying with her sister in Bend. Apparently, she'd been forced to resign from a book club she'd led for 15 years. People stopped trusting her, the friend said, even if it was personal. It changed how they saw her. I didn't correct them, because it wasn't just personal. It was betrayal at the deepest level, and trust once broken like that rarely returns. My Aunt Joan called me. She left a voicemail, her voice shaking, saying, "Your father would be so proud of you, Elena. I know that might sound strange, but he always said you were the strongest of us." I listened to that message 3 times. The strangest part was that despite everything that had happened, despite the devastation, I felt calm, more centered than I had in years. There was no longer a storm of doubt swirling around me. No more trying to read between lines or explain away subtle shifts in tone. I wasn't living in fear of being blindsided, because I had already seen the worst, and I had survived it. I returned to Portland quietly a week later. My clinic had covered for me graciously, my assistant Olivia told clients. I was away on family leave. When I walked through the door again, Jasper ran to me and licked my hands like I'd been gone a year. I cried for the first time in his fur. I stayed off social media for a while, deleted my accounts, cut ties with the noise. I didn't need the validation. I didn't want the attention. What I wanted was normalcy, quiet, healing. The wedding venue refunded half the deposit out of sympathy. The florist insisted I not pay the balance. The photographer sent me a message saying she had deleted every image, except for one, a shot of me walking out of the chapel veil floating in the wind. She titled it Freedom. I kept that one. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper handwritten in my mother's elegant cursive. It said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that what I did had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my own brokenness. I failed you. I failed myself. I'm sorry." I didn't write back, because the truth is I didn't need her apology to move on. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. It took time. Healing didn't come in a wave. It came in slow drips like water from a cracked faucet. Some mornings I woke up feeling okay. Others I stared at the ceiling wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. But I kept showing up, to work, to myself. The clinic was my safe place. The animals didn't ask questions, they didn't gossip. They just needed me to show up, and so I did. I mended broken legs, soothed anxious puppies, sat on the floor with older dogs. As they passed, peacefully held the hands of grieving owners. It reminded me that pain wasn't unique to me, that everyone carried some version of it. I started therapy. Not because I was falling apart, but because I didn't want to carry pieces of what happened into my future. My therapist, Lisa, was calm and steady. She never pushed, just gently helped me untangle what I had buried. She asked me once, "Do you think you've lost faith in love?" I sat with the question for a long time. "No," I finally said. "I've just lost faith in pretending." Because that's what I had been doing for years. Pretending everything was fine. Pretending I didn't notice the small, strange moments. The way Liam would grow quiet after being with my mother. The odd sense that something about their closeness felt misaligned. I had chosen not to look too closely, and now I would never make that mistake again. 3 months after the wedding. I took a trip to New Mexico. Alone. I'd never traveled solo before. I rented a small adobe house just outside of Santa Fe, surrounded by desert and silence. I spent my mornings hiking and my afternoons sketching animals from the local sanctuary. I didn't check email, I didn't take calls, I just let myself exist. It was the first time in years that I felt quiet on the inside. One evening, while watching the sun melt into the horizon, I wrote in my journal, "I am not the betrayal. I am the one who walked through it and still kept my soul intact." That sentence stayed with me. I came back to Portland with a clearer mind and a slower heart. I stopped trying to fill the silence. I let the quiet be enough. I reconnected with old friends, spent long Sundays in my garden, took long drives without destination. I even joined a community cooking class where I learned how to make pasta from scratch and talk to strangers without shrinking. Liam reached out once. It was a short email. "I know you'll never want to speak to me again, but I wanted to say I understand, and I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of it." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Some people asked if I regretted what I did at the wedding, if I ever felt it was too public, too cruel. I always gave the same answer. No, I told the truth. And the truth needed witnesses, because that's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't just wound, it erases. It makes you doubt your memory, your instincts, your worth. And when you shine a light on it fully, clearly, without shame, it loses its power. That moment at the altar wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. I wasn't just ending a relationship, I was reclaiming my name, my voice, myself. 6 months after the wedding, I opened a second location for my clinic in a neighboring town. I partnered with a rescue group that worked with senior pets' animals, often overlooked because of age or health conditions. I called it Second Light, a place for those who had been through something but still had life to give. That felt right. Sometimes clients would mention the video. They'd whisper or pause, unsure if they should bring it up. I never got angry. I just smiled and said, "Yes, that was me. But I'm more than that moment." Because I was. The world knew me as the woman who stood at the altar and told the truth. but I knew myself as something quieter. I was the woman who chose dignity over despair, clarity over chaos, grace over vengeance. I wasn't perfect, I wasn't fearless, but I had survived, and more than that, I had grown. A year has passed since the wedding. That never happened. Sometimes it feels like it all happened yesterday. Other times it feels like it happened to someone else, a different version of me, one who still trusted too quickly and doubted her instincts too often. But I don't live in that space anymore. I live here now in this quiet and deeply rooted life I've built. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy, but it is honest. I no longer measure my life by milestones like weddings or titles or photo perfect moments. I measure it by peace, how well I sleep at night, how I feel when I look in the mirror, how I carry myself when no one is watching. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that healing doesn't always look like closure. Sometimes healing looks like distance, like choosing not to pick up the phone, like walking away without needing an explanation, like deleting the email draft you never planned to send. People always ask me the same question: how did you find the strength to do what you did that day? And the truth is, I didn't feel strong. I felt wrecked. But there's a moment in every woman's life when the pain becomes heavier than the fear. And in that moment, you either stay small, stay polite, stay quiet, stay broken, or you speak. And I chose to speak. Not just for me, but for every woman who's ever swallowed betrayal with a smile. Every daughter who's ever looked at her mother and felt a fracture she couldn't explain. Every bride who walked down the aisle already carrying a secret she never asked for. What I did wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. Respect for the woman I was becoming. Respect for the truth even when it hurt. And most of all, respect for the kind of love I still believe in. Because yes, I still believe in love, but not the kind that wears disguises and feeds on silence. I believe in the kind that's steady, clear, and built in the daylight. The kind that doesn't ask you to dim your light or second guess your gut. The kind that meets you where you are and says, "You don't have to perform for me, just be." I haven't fallen in love again, not yet. But I've fallen back in love with myself, with my solitude, with the softness I thought I had to harden, with the courage I didn't know I had. I go for long walks now. I write in my journal. I spend Sundays with Jasper in the park watching him chase butterflies like it's the most important job in the world. And maybe it is. Because joy, I've learned, doesn't need to be earned through suffering. It can just exist. And it does. In the small moments, in the quiet mornings when the coffee is hot and the sky is pink. In the way a rescued dog leans into your leg with trust that hasn't been broken. In the way you can look back at the hardest day of your life and say, "I survived it. And I am still here. My mother still lives in Bend. We don't speak. Not because I hate her, but because I no longer carry the burden of repairing something she broke. Forgiveness isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's about release. And I've let it go." Liam moved to Arizona. Last I heard, he started a small design business. I don't think about him much. Not out of anger, just disinterest. There are no lingering what ifs. That story ended the moment I walked out of that chapel. But my story didn't end there. It began. And it's one I'm still writing. Every day, with every choice I write, a little more. If you're listening to this and you've been through something similar, if you've been lied to, blindsided, humiliated, know this: you are not weak because someone broke your trust. You are not unlovable because someone failed to see your worth. And you are not alone. There is a version of you on the other side of this pain that is stronger, softer, and more grounded than you can imagine. She is waiting for you. All you have to do is step toward her.